Good evening and welcome to the Independent City Council meeting. It's Tuesday, February 23rd, 2021. It's 6:30 in the evening and it's not raining, it's not icing, and everything is hunky-dory. Let the record show that the council members are all present and accounted for. And tonight we are also welcoming our members of our planning commission to tonight's meeting. First of all, I'm going to make a minor change in the agenda. We're going to have some brief presentations from PP&L, and also the folks from MyNet are going to make some brief presentations prior to our transportation system plan. And so this way they don't have to sit through all of our other business. So with that, I'm going to welcome the folks from PP&L. And I think you have some things you'd like to share with us. Good evening and welcome to City Council. Hi, Diana. Are you there? Okay, you're unmuted now. No, you're muted again.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Okay, yay.
Welcome.
Thank you. I don't know why my live feed is not showing up, but it's, oh, here we go. We'll start the video. There we go. And look, I put a picture of Independence, the Osprey nest, in our Pacific Power trucks right behind me. So it's like I'm just right there with you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So Jason, can you make me a presenter? He said he could.
You should be able to present now.
Okay. Let's see. Can you see that?
No, not yet.
Should say City of Independence.
Nothing's on my screen yet.
Okay. Well, let's see. Is there anything else I need to do on my end? It doesn't have any other options for me.
Do you have a green share screen button in the middle at the bottom?
Oh, there we go. Yep. Okay, let's try.
There we go. Okay, you're now coming up a leader in 2020 Garten Magic Quadrant in meeting. So there you go.
How about that?
That's better. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I'll make this real quick. I know you guys got a busy agenda tonight, but I just wanted to go through some things. It's been a busy last couple of weeks. And I also have Adam Kohler on the phone, who's our area operations manager. And he was front and center with all the restoration efforts that went on. And so for those of you that aren't familiar with PacifiCorp, you know, it's part of Berkshire Hathaway. We have a 6-part service area to Oregon, majority Eastern or Washington and Northern California. And then we all roll up together with Rocky Mountain Power, which is Wyoming, Idaho, and Utah. We serve 1.9 million customers and, you know, 250 communities, just like yourself in Oregon. And so Berkshire Hathaway is really taking a lead in decarbonization. We have a $3 billion investment we're just finishing up called our 2020 plan. It was repowering the wind that we already had, about 1,000 megawatts, and also adding about 1,900 additional megawatts of wind generation. We're committed to developing that bottom line that just as you guys keep changing what you want, we keep rising with new programs and things. One of the things you may have not noticed, but we have kept our rates flat for the last 3 years for Pacific Power customers. We made a commitment back in 2017. And this year in January, your rates actually went down, average customer about 5.2% in January. And we continue to find ways to lower our operating costs. A lot of that has to do with independent operating system where we can buy and sell power in 5-minute intervals now instead of 15 minutes like we used to. And with Pacific Power, we've been able to buy a lot of, and even get some for free from California often, that some of their solar generation when it's in excess. And so we've been able to do that and saving hundreds of millions of dollars for our customers by doing that. So that's one of the huge reasons rate went down, is that transition fuel mechanism. The other portion of this is, you may have even noticed, our mobile apps have really increased. Top left corner is an outage map, which you can click on it. It refreshes every 15 minutes. Probably a lot of you used it in the last week or so. Also, you can decide how you want to report the outage. You can do it by, a text message. You can get a text message back that says when power has been restored or what the latest estimated time of restoration is. So all of those have been great advances for us in the last year and a half. And I'm going to let Adam take it from here. I see his face on the screen. As far as this last week was one that is unlike any other that we've had. So Adam?
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to start off by thanking you for this opportunity to talk to you a little bit. So as you can see here in these pictures, this was quite the event. This started off as an ice, wind, and snowstorm that hit fast, starting out in Falls City and going out towards the Staten area. The unique thing about this is that the storm actually came in 2 waves. The first was an ice storm which hit on Friday evening, which caused outages across the areas. The weight of the ice caused our lines to break and fall, which created power outages. But when we really ran into some trouble was late Friday and early Saturday morning. And that's when the weight of the ice was no longer simply causing the wires to fall, but it was also causing a massive amount of trees and tree limbs to break and fall, which created a swath of destruction as those weighted down objects tore down our lines and broke our poles across our territory. The picture on the left shows just the amount of ice. You can see there's about 1 inch of ice on our wire. The picture on the right shows what happens when a heavy tree or something else falls on our wire and obviously breaks the poles in half. I don't know if any of you were able to experience this, but this happened with our crews and with me myself. Literally, you're standing outside in the dark and you can hear the branches crack, and then you hear the crash and fall down. And it was truly just this eerie thing that I personally will never forget, and I don't think anybody else will either. This was one for the books in terms of winter storms, the largest capital restoration project that anyone can remember in recent history. It includes replacing poles, cross arms, transformers. Over the course of 9 days, we replaced over 230 poles, 160 transformers, 420 cross arms, and countless miles of wire. Actually, Diane, it's moving a little bit faster.
Oh, sorry.
Picture 7.
I'll go back.
So, this slide shows the tree, the ice, the standing water that makes setting those poles a challenge. Along those lines, we deployed an incredible amount of resources from around the area to respond to the massive destruction of our facilities. This includes calling in our partners from Iowa, Illinois, Idaho, Wyoming, Nevada, Washington, and Utah, as well as our locally resourced crews. Essentially what happens in the power industry is once an outage like this hits a market, for example, PG and Pacific Power were both impacted, a call for resources is sent out immediately. And those folks, for example, the Illinois folks, they were on site within 36 hours to assist us with that work. But when I talk about crews, I'm not only talking about the linemen who you see actually performing the work, but also our vegetation crews, which went to work to clear the trees off our facilities, as well as things like flagging resources to make sure that the work is performed in a safe manner, and support individuals to work logistics support. If you think about it, items as simple as keeping workers fed when they're out there in the muck is quite the challenge. At our highest count, we had about 450 additional resources working to restore power and independence in the surrounding areas. I will tell you, as challenging as this work is, our crews are made up of the type of folks who really enjoy the hard work and the long hours. They truly live for it. So this slide is one that, again, on the right-hand side, you can see the massive amount of ice that is formed on that wire. And if you just think about the weight of that, you can see why some of that extra weight will cause problems. But just to talk about independence, for a variety of reasons, independence was cleared and restored first in terms of our areas. Some of that was due to the type of damage which occurred, but some of it was also due to the deployment of our resources. And to be honest with you, a lot of it was due to folks who were assigned to the area. I had some of our hardest workers who were working in the independence area. And someone, as someone who was asked to track down certain outages, such as major street intersections, I can tell you that Independence had some of those hardest workers that put in significant hours. We're talking working in excess of 24 hours straight to get those customers back in service. As the slide notes, about half of the city was not impacted. And I've got to tell you, I think some of that's due to the reliability projects that Pacific Power has completed in recent years, but it also has quite a bit of luck that falls into play there too in terms of what the damage was. This slide shows a breakdown of the restoral efforts in terms of our customers out of service and Independence. As you can see, Friday the 12th, which is when most of that damage hit, it was very high. We only were able to restore about 3% of the customers. And I'll tell you what happened was, and this is no kidding, we had line crews out there putting the wire back up. They would turn around and the wire would fall back down again. We had multiple situations where our contractors or our internal forces were placing wire for a span up to 3 times before we realized that this was a fool's errand and we had to pull them off because they weren't doing any good. Going back to the chart on the right, you can see that the restoration through Thursday was tracking with our anticipated modeling. But the end of the week was a little bit more challenging due to the nature of the outages. We found quite a few pockets of outages which were not what we would deem as an easy fix. A lot of times as we get to the end of these storms, we really expect there to be some challenges. It's the idea of the low-hanging fruit. And in this situation, some of those restorations were a little bit more ugly than we anticipate. So this picture here is actually one of my favorite because it shows the lengths that our linemen will go to in order to get the power back up for the customers. What I'd like to call your attention to is not the lineman that's on that pole there, but rather if you look at the vegetation, which is at the base of the pole. In this case, our crew had to fight their way through very thick blackberry bushes simply to get to the poles. And if you can imagine the wire and the conductor being strung between the poles and the lead line getting snagged on every single thorn, you can understand that was quite the undertaking, but one that took place throughout our region. I'd also like to note that as we meet right now, PGE still has a significant number of customers that are without power. We actively shed our contractors as we were making restoration efforts to assist PGE. And I currently have a crew and a general foreman helping PGE and their customers right now to get them back in service. It truly is a collaborative effort, but it's one that, as some of those PGE customers can attest, is a challenge when you don't have that power with you. Diana, it's up to you.
Yeah, thank you, Adam. You know, we are an energy provider, but we're so much more. We feel like we have leadership roles in your community as far as, you know, even Kate Swartzler there is on our regional advisory board for Pacific Power. So we care about what Independence says and how, you know, these are some of the things that we contribute to throughout the year, trying to make sure that you guys have all the tools that you need. The world, like I said, the world is changing around us. We have great responsibility and we're adapting. We're anticipating what you need and making those shifts and changes. Customers today want us to be more than an energy provider. They want us to help their communities be economically viable. They want us to be sustainable and cleaner and healthier. And we believe that we're positioned uniquely to do that. We care about the bottom line, and that's why we use our tagline really for our whole company is we're powering your greatness. So thank you for your time. Is there any questions or anything that we can answer for you while we're here?
Do people have questions? I just want to thank you folks for being so helpful. Well, you know, as one of the people that was without power for a while, it was really nice when it came back on, and really appreciated it. And thank you for having the continual stream of communication. I know that really helped with our staff to know what was going on. So thank you very much for the work you do, and also for taking the time to give us an update. Really appreciate it.
Great. Yeah, we were in contact with your staff, with Tom, every few hours, I'm sure, just like keeping them updated on how many customers were restored. So appreciate the communication both ways. So thank you very much.
Mayor, I have a question.
Sure. I'm sorry. I'm trying to get all the screens up. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, no problem. Being involved in a local climate task force, my question to you is, can we get a graphic that shows visually the progression towards maximum decarbonization?
I'm sorry, can you say that again? I couldn't quite hear you.
Can we get a graphic that shows visually your planned or expected progression towards maximum decarbonization
Yeah, so one of the things is by 2029, we will no longer have coal in our rates. So we're taking a very aggressive, there's some challenges to that because we serve a lot of communities like in Wyoming, where those communities, that is the bulk of their jobs is in some of the coal plants and things like that. But we are currently the second largest owner of wind in the United States. We're coming close on that, and solar, and some geothermal that's been coming online down in Klamath Falls. But we're definitely moving. We expect by 2030, we have to have it all out. And so we have actually accelerated that and have it all out by 2029 in Oregon.
Great.
I can give you a graphic if you want.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, yes, Councilor Morton.
I'd like to add on one comment. It's kudos to the power company. We had a situation after our power came on where there were a couple of very large limbs that were still crossed over a live power wire, and there was fire and sparks and all kinds of dangerous looking stuff. I couldn't reach anybody at the power company because our Verizon was down. So I got in the car and drove down to the fire station and told them what the problem was. And within 15 minutes, the fire station came down and the guys looked at it and said, we'll be back. And within a half an hour from the time I first went to the fire station, they brought a power guy with us. They solved the problem. They said, there you go, everything's fine, and left. So I was extremely impressed, first of all, of the interaction between two agencies and the power company's quick response.
Thank you. I love hearing that.
Great. Additional questions? Thank you again so much for speaking with us today. We're going to continue moving and let you continue with your evening.
Thank you very much. Have a great night.
Thank you. I think we also have a presentation being made by somebody from MyNet. I'm not sure who's the presenter. Jason, do we have somebody from MyNet? Is there? Okay, looks like PJ's joining us.
Are you able to hear me okay?
We can hear you, PJ. Good evening and welcome to the Independent City Council.
Good evening, Mayor, council members, and all other attendees. Thank you for your time this evening. So for those of you who do not know me, my name is PJ Armstrong. I'm the Operations Director for MyNet. My primary responsibilities here are overseeing the outside plant and technical staff. So I'd like to present to you a summary of impact to MyNet resulting from the ice storm that occurred early Saturday morning, February 13th, including service interruptions and damages, staff responses, expense, and customer experience. In regard to service interruptions and outages, power went out at the MyNet Network Operations Center early Saturday morning. I'm happy to report that both the UPS in the NOC and diesel generator functioned exactly as we expected. All systems continued running uninterrupted until power was restored well over 12 hours later. Our leased fiber circuit providing easy video services was damaged in multiple places outside the MyNet network, causing video service to be unavailable until the provider was able to restore the link on the afternoon of Monday, February 15th. Both diverse fiber paths delivering voice circuits to MyNet were damaged outside the MyNet network, resulting in interruptions of voice calls originating outside of and coming into the MyNet voice switch, and vice versa, until approximately 5 p.m. on Saturday the 13th. Generally speaking, all services were down for all customers while the power was out. Based on traffic monitoring, we know that the power went out in the network at about 5 a.m. And a significant portion of power was restored at approximately 3 p.m. on Saturday. And over the following 3 or 4 days, we continued receiving reports of power restoration in certain areas of town. In regard to staff response, our response to the ice storm was immediate. Early in the AM, Saturday the 13th, we were at the MyNet NOC assessing the status of our core equipment. Field crews were mobilized immediately, and our customer service group were engaged to assist with incoming calls, website support tickets, and social media reports. As responders across the spectrum quickly discovered, communication and therefore response was significantly hampered by the failure of both traditional and cellular phone networks. On Saturday morning, our field staff inspected fiber transport routes for damage and cleared trees as needed. Simultaneously, we attempted to proactively identify damaged customer service drops. We were extremely fortunate in that a limited number of trees had landed on MyNet aerial plant and no damage occurred to any significant transport fiber. Nearly all physical damage was limited to service drops or customer premise equipment. As soon as transport inspection was complete, we began service repairs. Our field crews worked Saturday the 13th through this last Saturday the 20th, restoring services to MyNet and WVF customers. This consisted of almost 100 incidents of broken fiber drops or bad equipment. Times of crisis and subsequent response are always a big challenge for our very small staff size. For our almost 6,000 MyNet and WVF customers, we have a total of 7 outside plant employees and 7 customer service employees. So this translates to 1 outside plant and 1 CSR for every 850 plus customers. While this allows us to operate with comparatively very low personnel expense, it also makes effective response to problems outside of the normal day difficult at best. In regard to expense, again, we were very fortunate to escape damage to any of our knock equipment or significant transport fibers. Material costs for repairs resulting from this storm will mostly be limited to drop fiber and customer premise equipment replacement. While not insignificant, this will be substantially less than what it could have been. The other significant expense will be overtime. Communication networks are virtually uninsurable. These sorts of crises generally and almost immediately exceed dollars set aside for such purposes. Under earlier board direction and management, $0 were typically set aside for such occurrences. My understanding from our GM Dawn and Finance Director John is that estimates of expenses for this occurrence appear to be covered with our rainy day fund. In regard to customer experience and response, as mentioned earlier, as soon as power was restored, data and voice services to the vast majority of our customer base came right back up, with video shortly after. We were fortunate to have only 1.6% of customers affected beyond this, considering the magnitude of overall damage in the community. Of the nearly 100 reported service outages requiring repair, by Wednesday, February 17, we had resolved almost half of those. By Friday, February 19, there were 7 remaining, 5 of which were repaired on Saturday the 20th, and 2 of which we are still working to coordinate with the customer's schedule. Response from the customer base to our efforts was overwhelmingly positive. The efforts put forth by our staff occurred because we all recognize as a local municipally owned service provider that customer experience is monumental to our success and reputation matters. Unlike other services such as electricity and water, we do have competition to our services. We are measured and maintain our customers' loyalty to a large degree based upon our customers' experience. Perhaps our ability year over year to maintain an unprecedented industry penetration rate speaks the most to this. And while our competition remained and remains out of service in areas, we have had a number of their customers contact MyNet inquiring about service. Needless to say, there have not been any new install calendar slots available yet. As I stated, the feedback we received was mostly positive and appreciative. In times of crisis, there are always a small number of customers we are just unable to satisfy despite our efforts. So for a brief moment, I would like to recognize the phenomenal job our staff did in these challenging circumstances, where they were working in adverse conditions, shorthanded, weather impacted, overwhelmed with phone calls, text messages, emails, social media posts, etc. At times, being berated or legitimately threatened over the phone or in person, it kind of comes with the territory, but it's never easy to handle, though they handle it very well. The vast majority of our customer base does understand the quality of product MyNet offers and that MyNet employees are all dedicated to delivering the best possible experience we can provide. This is not something I believe our competition's customers can say they benefit from. This is my presentation of impact to MyNet resulting from the recent ice storm. Thank you for your time and consideration, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Does anybody have any questions at this point for the presenter? Well, PJ, thank you very much for giving us the rundown. I think it was helpful. We appreciate it. And thank you for taking the time to share with us this evening.
You bet. Thank you for your time.
Okay, great. We're going to move forward to the presentation on the transportation system plan. And Mr. Pessimir, I think this is you, and then I think you're passing that on to some other people. So I turn it to you.
Well, thank you, Mary. Yeah, I am going to pass it off right away. I'll pass it to Fred Evander, who will kind of do a kickoff for the project management team. But thanks to Planning Commission members who are joining us tonight. Obviously, we're very excited to get a transportation system plan in place. It is one of the key pieces that we need in order to move forward on many different items for our community. And it has been a challenge to do during COVID, but with some creativity and a lot of hard work, I think we've made great progress on that. So with that, I'll turn it over to Fred, and Fred can turn it over to Kittleson Associates, who's been kind of doing the bulk of this, but definitely wanted to make sure we continue to let council and the Planning Commission know what's going on. Hope the community is also listening to this as well as we continue to collect public input, as well as move this project forward. So with that, Fred, go ahead.
Sounds great. Thanks, Tom. I appreciate it. Hi there, Council. Nice to be with you tonight. Also, Planning Commission, thanks for joining us. I appreciate y'all taking time on this Tuesday to just spend some time talking transportation with all of us. So yeah, really, what we're talking about here is, you know, just how to accommodate growth, how to move people effectively through the community through the next for the next 20 years. That's basically what a transportation system plan looks at. And it's not just things like cars, though we tend to think of cars when we think of transportation. It's things like transit, it's things like bicycles, it's things like walking, right? And so basically this project has looked at all of these things, and we've gone through a number of detailed studies looking at the future, what future growth looks like, all of that sort of stuff. And we've gotten to this point where we have a set of preferred alternatives. That is what Matt will be talking about from Kittleson and Associates. And I do believe he is on the phone. Matt, are you? Let me flip through this here.
Yeah, I'm here.
Perfect. All right. So Matt, I'm going to hand it off to you, and you go ahead and give your presentation.
Okay. Give me just a quick second to share my screen and make sure you guys are all looking at what I'm looking at here. Let's flip those. And is everybody see the presentation here?
Yes, it's on my screen.
Great, thank you. So my name is Matt Bell, and I'm with Kittleson Associates. I've been the consultant project manager on the project. This is a joint planning commission and city council workshop for the transportation system plan. So I'm going to just give you a quick update on the project, let you know where we are in the overall process. And then, as Fred mentioned, we're going to spend a little time talking about some of the key elements from the preferred plan and try to save as much time as we can at the end for general discussions. So this is the project schedule that we've been using to kind of keep track of the project. As you can see, we kicked it off back in January of 2020. And we're currently in the December to March timeframe where we have gone through and identified the preferred and cost-constrained alternatives. We're going to talk a little bit about what that means tonight. Moving forward in the March to May timeframe, we're going to be jumping into the draft transportation system plan update, as well as the implementing ordinances and findings. Finally, we'll be back in front of you guys in May to July timeframe to adopt the TSP. So this TSP process is largely guided by a series of technical memos that we create along the way. And just real quickly here, the technical memos, Tech Memo 1 established the background, the policy, the plans and policies and the framework that serve as really the background for the development of the TSP. Techmemo 2 covers the goals and objectives and evaluation criteria, which were used to largely guide the process, as well as most recently used in the selection and the prioritization of the preferred alternatives. And I'll talk about that again here in a moment. We did a fairly thorough inventory of the existing transportation system. We then evaluated existing and projected out into the future and evaluated future conditions. And through this process, we identified a series of gaps in the network's deficiencies and essentially needs to accommodate future growth. So our last memo, and I think the last time that we've talked, was to really cover the alternatives and funding program. So that was a series of different alternatives that we had identified in order to address these needs, gaps, deficiencies, and needs. So most recently, we've been working on Techmemo 6. This is the preferred alternatives. This takes the alternatives that we developed and identifies what the preferred one will be going forward into the TSP update. So that's been the focus of our last several meetings and largely what we're going to talk about tonight. So as far as our meetings and milestones, we've had 3 meetings with our advisory committees. We have both a technical advisory committee and a citizens advisory committee. And we've also had 2 online open houses. Each of these were originally slated to be in-person open houses, but given the conditions over the last year, they've both shifted to online. I think something we also talked about recently, and it's not reflected on this, is we also had one subsequent meeting, a YouTube live event where we sort of hosted a question and answer session on a variety of the alternatives that we're also going to talk about tonight. So looking forward, we have one more online open house that's going on currently. It actually kicked off yesterday and will go through the first week in March. We will have another, we're working, this is our Joint Planning Commission and City Council work session, but we have one more meeting with our advisory committees. We have one more work session with you folks, and then we'll be moving into the Planning Commission and City Council hearing process. And just to put it on your calendars, our next joint work session is currently targeted for the 2nd week in May, and our PC and CC hearings are scheduled for the 1st week in June and the last week in June.
Hey, Matt, do you want to throw in the website where people can do the online open house?
Yeah, thank you, Fred. So the website is independencetsp.com. And that's the project website that we've been using for the last year or so. And right there on the homepage, you'll be able to see a link to the open house. Right.
And the YouTube live event is when, Matt?
Oh boy, thanks for putting me on the spot there, Fred. What day did we decide on?
It's going to be, I believe, March 3rd at 6 o'clock.
Oh,
so we will answer any questions that people have. Feel free to tune in on March 3rd at 6 o'clock. We will take any question.
So I'm going to spend just a few minutes here going over some of the key elements of the preferred plan. And these are so I mentioned earlier that we developed a bunch of goals and objectives and evaluation criteria to sort of guide the process. And throughout the process, these were really the key elements that seemed to be where we seem to be spending a lot of our time and a lot of our focus and a lot of our discussions around these sort of key areas. So first one, the improving east-west and north-south connectivity. So this is one of the first things that when we sat down and talked to the city about kicking off the TSP, this is one of the first issues that they identified. Next is improving key connections. These are primarily intersections throughout the community that have existing congestion, existing safety issues that need to be addressed. Enhancing bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure, establishing a low stress transportation network, and I'll talk a little bit about what low stress means, and then improving access to transit and transit service. So I'm going to spend a little time on each of these. So for improving east-west and north-south connectivity, there's a number of different ways that we would like to try to do this. One is to make a few minor modifications to the functional classification plan. So this is the plan that establishes the hierarchy of streets that identifies what are the different design elements for each of those streets and the types of speeds, volumes, facilities that you might expect along each of those streets. Next, we've identified a number of new major street connections. These are both collector level and arterial level connections, some of which you're probably very familiar with, that include the southern arterial from Main Street over to the western part of town. And then a lot of the collectors that were identified in the Southwest concept plan. But we've also identified a number of new connections that just to try to improve, again, that north-south and east-west connectivity. We also have a number of new local street connections, and these are connections that primarily come off the collector streets and try to improve connectivity on a lower level, reducing reliance on some of the arterial and collector streets for making shorter connections. Lastly, we wanted to establish some freight and farm equipment routes. Some of our advisory committee members and others have talked to us about some of the needs of the farm equipment and particularly the needs of the freight, and making sure that we've identified specific routes for them to travel through and into town. Now, I'll tell you, based on some of the feedback we've already received, is that some of the changes that we're proposing to the functional classification plan may require further conversations with like City of Monmouth, potentially with the county and others, to just better understand what it is that we're trying to accomplish there. A lot of the new major streets, like, well, these things come with a pretty high dollar amounts. You know, a lot of these will probably be developed or likely to be developed through private development and other larger capital type projects. So I'll get into that here in a moment as well. The improving key connections. So these are the 5 or so intersections that were identified as either having existing operational or safety issues or were projected to have issues in the future. Probably won't be a big surprise to a lot of folks to see some of these. So we have 51 and our Main Street and Polk Street. And this is an intersection that serves a variety of different uses and has a ability to help us try to alleviate traffic on some of the streets that people might be using to bypass this particular intersection. We spent a lot of time talking about Main Street and Monmouth Street in the downtown area, and one of the graphics shown there on the right kind of illustrates some of those. We also talked about Main Street and River Street, and then a number of intersections along Monmouth Street. So when I say we talked a lot about Main and Monmouth, we in addition to the 2 that are shown here, we talked about a lot of different potential alternatives. So a lot of the alternatives didn't just focus on the intersection itself, but focused on larger system level improvements, larger circulation improvements, things that could potentially be done to alleviate traffic right there in the downtown area without significantly disrupting bicycle and pedestrian travel and just the character of the downtown. So we've explored a lot of different ideas for addressing those sort of key connections there. The enhancing bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure on major streets. So the major streets, Monmouth and Main, of course, Main Street and Corvallis Road. So the different needs of these streets coming in and out of town. Same with Hoffman Road, Polk Street, and then a number of other streets. So we're one of the things that we've been, one of these next 2 are really related, but one of the things that we've sort of struggled with is identifying what types of facilities we want on the different roadways, and what can we fit within the existing curb to curb space. And so we've looked at a lot of different options, and we've been weighing out the benefits of those different options and balancing the needs of capacity for the motor vehicles, as well as the needs to provide connectivity for bikes and pets. And these types of facilities really contribute to what we call a low stress transportation network. So a low stress really essentially just means comfortable, and there's a scale of these things. Where is it comfortable for the people with families and small children? Is it comfortable for people that are a little bit more confident being on a bike or walking on the side of a road, or is it comfortable for just a real small number of people that are really dependent on like walking and biking and other modes? So establishing that low stress network, we've identified a number of new bike facilities. Primarily, this map is actually showing what the different bike facilities we're talking about. So these are mostly bike lanes, but a few places where we've identified things for like shared pavement markings and bike boulevard treatments. We have a number of new pedestrian facilities. These are mostly sidewalks, but also include new crosswalks, and a number of new shared use paths and trails, which, you know, largely building on the city's recent parks plan. So the last thing is the improving access to transit and transit services. So we've as you're well aware, Chariots is the primary transit service provider in the area, and they're currently serving Independence with a couple of different routes. Don't expect that to change significantly over the course of this TSP, but so a lot of the things that the city can do are primarily focused on coordinating with that transit service agency, improving connections to transit stops, providing amenities at some of those transit stops, such as shelters and benches and signs and garbage cans and lighting and different things that make them a little bit more comfortable for folks. Encouraging an appropriate mix and density of uses that support public transit. So this is obviously some little more density in and around the transit areas. And then finally, providing and planning for park and ride locations. One other thing that's not listed here, but something we've talked a lot about, is also establishing transit, or not transit, pardon me, mobility hubs throughout the community. So this is one of the things that we've talked about that has a transit component, has an emerging technology component, and really emphasizes connectivity for alternative travel modes. So this is these types of things really encourage walking, biking, various ride sharing, and other types of travel modes. So pretty cool things there. So this is the total cost at this point. A lot of these cost estimates, I would consider these planning level at this point. So when we talk about the preferred plan, this is the if you could do everything in the city over the next 20 years, the total cost of that preferred plan is about $63.8 million. So that that includes that southern arterial, which comes with a pretty big cost. It includes a lot of those major streets and a lot of other projects that do come with really high dollar amounts. So what we try to do is we try to narrow in a little bit on what we think is reasonable for the city to fund over the 20-year planning horizon. So what we consider to be the cost constrained plan. And at this point, based on what we've identified as the potential dollar amount that's going to be available over that 20-year horizon, the cost constrained plan primarily consists of those high priority projects. So about $9.5 million or so over the 20-year horizon, or a little less than $500,000 per year. So the rest of this, the medium priority, the low priority, these could are likely to be funded, or not. These are considered to be aspirational, but could also be funded through a variety of different funding sources, and we've identified a number of those in a few different memos that we've prepared. But these are things where you could get funding at a federal level, at a state level, and potentially at a local level, depending on the nature of the project and the level of development within the vicinity. So some really big numbers there. Again, about $9.5 million for what we consider to be the high priority or the cost constrained project list, and then about 63.8 for the total cost. That is the end of my presentation. I do have one more quick slide I'll just throw out there. Is the we're still collecting feedback on our Tech Memo 6, which is the summary of preferred alternatives. It is available on the website. Again, that's independencetsp.com. We'd like feedback by the February 26th, but I'm sure we would accept it beyond that time frame as well. If you can and have time, participate in our online open house. Again, it is going on right now via the website, and it will be going through at least March 8th. although given conditions, we likely to extend that as well. Lastly, again, we have our next batch of technical advisory committee and citizens advisory committee meetings in May. And I apologize, that should actually say the next time that we're going to be meeting as a joint work session, but our next joint work session again would be about the second week in May, which is the same time frame as this committee meeting. So that is the end of my presentation.
Okay, I'm sure there are people who have questions and or comments about this. And I think I saw Councilor Kaur putting her hand up first. And yeah, if you want to speak, just put your hand up and I'll just call you. Councilor Kaur, feel free.
Thank you. On the graph with the cost on it, you had safe routes to school zeroed out. Is that because the plan is to get grants for that?
No, that's a great question and very observant of you there. No, essentially what we did there is the safe routes to school. We've identified a number of different activities that the city can do to promote safe routes to school. A lot of these are, at this point, more policy oriented type things. The actual physical improvements that you might do to enhance safe routes to school are largely under the bike and ped and safety, some of the other areas. But that is something that one of the questions that we put out to our committees is, are there specific policies or that we should potentially be identifying as programs and putting a funding to for safe routes to school? Otherwise, a lot of what would contribute towards the safe routes to school program are going to be those bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure improvements like sidewalks, bike lanes, crosswalks, things like that.
Thank you.
Councilor Takis.
Yeah, when you were talking about the costs, were those figured in today's dollars, or did you kind of average it out with inflation over the next 20 years?
Those are today's dollars. So there's no inflation rate put in there. Those are based on unit. So these are all unit costs that we collect from similar projects that are done here in the area, and they're largely based on what we're planning to do, the length, the width, the depth, and all the associated construction costs. So there's a lot built into this. It's not just the construction, but it's the mobilization, it's the engineering behind it, the mobilization behind it, and all that other stuff as well. So we try to be as conservative as we can, but there's certainly elements that could be missing. So if there's like significant stormwater issues or there's significant wetlands or other things like that, we try to account for some of that, but we can't account for all of that.
Councilor Morton.
Thank you. I've been looking at these documents as you showed them. Can you review for me which streets are being considered for east-west arterials?
Yeah, the primary east-west arterials will continue to be Hoffman and Polk, Monmouth, and then pending lots of development or lots of new funding sources, that the new east-west arterial that essentially aligns with Mountain Fir Avenue to the south. Those are the main east-west ones.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Roden.
I have two questions. I saw that parking is a low priority issue, and I would disagree with that, but why is that not more a higher issue? And then my second question is, have we done a study on the impact to the downtown businesses by making those streets one way?
Both fantastic questions. Parking, I think it probably, whenever we went through and prioritized projects based on the evaluation criteria, it just may not have scored as well as some of the infrastructure improvement projects. It probably just isn't hitting a lot of the same goals and objectives for the overall plan. It is the parking, what the $50,000 is largely for a parking management plan to be done for the downtown area. We identify the basic parameters around that plan, but we don't go so far as to identify specific improvements or specific policies or strategies as part of the TSP. And to answer your second question, well, sorry, to finish the first question, I'm certainly happy to bump that up. It would, and it's the kind of thing that it could really fall into high or medium priority.
Well, just to add on to that,
Yeah.
have you been to downtown Independence during a music festival or the fiestas? Or because if you do, you'd notice that parking is jammed all down the street to Old Town Independence, and then all the way down, mostly even all the way down towards 7th Street. So parking is definitely an issue in our communities because we have wonderful things going on downtown. So. And not even just during those periods too, but you know, it's hard to find a parking spot downtown now to go to our local businesses.
And to answer the second part of your question, as far as circulation goes, we have talked about the potential impacts of some of those circulation changes on street parking. When we get to a point where we have it's one of the few where we haven't identified a specific alternative for that particular project, but we do recognize that there would be on-street parking impacts, particularly where we're introducing sort of one-way or two-way traffic in some of those areas.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we also take into account those downtown businesses, because we've already seen this year be a huge struggle for them. We want to make it so our future is brighter, not that we're going to be impacting them in a devastating way. That's just my input.
Hey, Matt, would you be willing to sort of describe the sort of your considerations about, or sort of what your analysis has shown about like say a traffic light versus like what that southern arterial would do at Main and Monmouth? I know that you've studied that quite a bit. Would you explain what you found?
Yeah, I know, maybe, unless if you want me to relate that back to the parking issue, that might be, I can definitely do that as well. So Main and Monmouth, again, is one of our most challenging intersections to try to address as part of this. We recognize that most traffic that travels through or to any place in Independence is coming through that intersection, and as we project out into the future, it's much the same thing, and so that intersection has a lot of challenges today. We're expecting it to continue to have challenges in the future. We've spent a lot of time thinking about how what we could do to potentially alleviate those, and one of those is a traffic signal. And in one of our committee meetings and talking with ODOT was, even though we were suggesting we would only really need separate left and right turn lanes on Monmouth Street or at the eastbound approach to the traffic signal, ODOT feels that to gain the most benefit out of that traffic signal would be to actually provide separate turn lanes at the north and southbound approaches as well. And when you do that, you start to impact on-street parking within that downtown area for at least a block, if not a block and a half or more, on each side of that intersection. And some examples of this, there's actually a pretty great example of this in downtown Monmouth. And you can see it right there in the middle. They have a traffic signal. They have separate turn lanes at each approach. The turn lanes stretch out for at least a block and a half. And so on-street parking is essentially eliminated. So we don't like that approach because we recognize the kind of impacts that's going to have in the downtown, and not just on-street parking, but just the general walkability of it. And so one of the larger, longer term alternatives that we've been considering, and as you guys are well aware, is that southern arterial. So the southern arterial does have the ability to pull a lot of the traffic off of Main and Monmouth and redirect traffic that is traveling to the Southwest Independence concept area through that southern arterial. And essentially, a lot of the issues that we had identified potential issues at Main and Monmouth, as well as 7th and 4th and Monmouth. A lot of those issues, I wouldn't say they go away, because some of those issues exist today and likely to exist in the future, but they're significantly reduced by the amount of traffic that is shifted down to that southern arterial. And I think that the type of the degree to which it's reduced would suggest that in the long term, you wouldn't need something like a traffic signal at that intersection. Does that answer your question, Fred?
That's, yeah, no, that definitely is helpful. Yes.
Other people with questions and or comments?
I did have a question.
Councilor Job.
Thank you. I don't have it in front of me right now, your slide, but the bikes and pedestrians, $4 to $5 million, and that was in the urgent, high priority. What does that look like for $4 to $5 million? How, I mean, are we talking about widening the streets for the bikes, or just painting, or?
Yeah, it's a little bit of everything. The painting can be cheap. Paint is generally cheap. We do try to avoid widening as much as we can. So just to talk about bikes for a second. One of the things that we've tried to do as part of this is identify the roadways where you're probably all really well aware of your development code, and in the development code for collector facilities, it specifies that bike lanes are needed, but there's a trade-off, and it recognizes that the trade-off between on-street parking and bike lanes, and that whenever the average daily traffic on those roadways reaches a certain point, the city can reevaluate the need for those on-street bike lanes. So in the near term, a lot of the collector facilities have on-street parking. In the long term, when those volumes grow to the level that we expect them to grow over the next 20 years, a handful of them start to need things like on-street bike lanes. So those facilities have the width today to accommodate the on-street bike lanes, like pretty comfortable bike lanes. And so the cost associated with that is pretty low. The opportunity cost, the trade-offs for the on-street parking is pretty high, and I'm sure the residents would agree. But the overall cost of that is pretty low. Sidewalks are expensive, and as you're probably well aware, and in some cases where you have gaps, and we're identifying the need to fill like a significant gap. And for some reason, the first one that pops into my head is Stryker Road. Stryker is a collector. We want to see bike lanes and sidewalks on both sides in the long term. That sidewalk all along the east side of that roadway is a pretty expensive sidewalk to fill in. But that's also an example of one where, as redevelopment is occurring in the largely industrial areas on the east side of Stryker Road, that would be a condition of approval to provide those frontage improvements. So it's a cost. So it's identified in there as a high priority cost, but it's likely to be a cost that would be addressed by private development or some combination of private development, public funds. I don't know if I got straight at your question there. I'm sorry.
No, I guess I was more interested in what $4 to $5 million, like what are we getting for the pedestrians and the bicyclists? I guess that was kind of what I was thinking of. I mean, I understand, wanting more trails, things like that, but in the city for safety, are you like, what does $4 to $5 million get you?
Yeah, no, that's I guess I could pull up in our tech memo and list off what the specific projects are on the high priority, if that's what you like, or I may need to follow up with you afterwards on that.
Yeah, maybe you can just follow up. That's fine.
Okay, but yeah, it is a list of there is just a list of high priority projects in the ped bike and, like you say, in the transit that largely accommodate that. One thing I'll mention there on the transit side is, or sorry, the ped and bike side is that one of the things that we heard early on in this process is that the city really wanted not just the city, but the advisory committees and the folks that we had met with really wanted to emphasize active transportation in the community, providing bikes, pedestrian connections, enhancing the trail network, and just basically improving access to some of the recreational amenities around town, particularly the waterfront. And so there a lot of the goals, a lot of the associated evaluation criteria that are used to kind of guide the process had a bike and ped like sort of emphasis to them, like right off the bat. So that's why we see a lot of bike and ped projects there in that high priority as well as the medium priority project list.
Other questions? I'm going to weigh in a little bit here because obviously I'm very interested, living on the corner of 7th and Monmouth Street. And so I can watch traffic on a daily basis. I'm really in agreement that the Southern Arterial is a huge impactor in so many parts of our community because of where our growth is going to be and where people transiting through town go. I really would like to see when you put up the collage of 5 pictures with different little colors of where turning was going to go on Monmouth Street and 51, at Polk and Main, 4th Street and 7th Street. I'd love to see those. I'm on an iPad. I don't get my little collage. I couldn't see all the pictures, and I would love to see that shared with all of the people on this call so that they could see what we're really talking about in real live. You know, if you're talking about one-way streets, where might a one-way street go? Where would that look? Because I think not just this group needs to take a look at this. People in our community need to start noodling on this and seeing what some of the choices are. And I think that would be really good, because that is if otherwise it's too abstract.
Yeah, so Mayor, I think that's a great segue into participating in the online open house. That is going to have an extreme amount of detail on all these things. Correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, but you know, if people haven't participated in those in the past, that's an opportunity to really get way further down in the detail. Certainly Matt can share information to point out to where you need to go, but that's if people haven't had an invitation to that, and obviously we're going to be promoting that pretty heavily here and everything else, but there's a lot more detail about how those things work, and allows you to also provide your comments and thoughts, and then when we have the YouTube live conversation, you can ask your questions and get direct answers to those. So for those out there that are listening, or for you all, now is the time to participate and get your input and get more detailed information, because we are getting to the end of the process, and there is a lot more information out there for you guys to consider. So Matt, is that a good explanation of what you guys have put together for that open house and information to provide?
Yeah, definitely. The same sort of key elements that we talked about tonight are really emphasized in the open house, and that's by design. I think what we did, while we did get what we feel like is a really good amount of feedback during our first couple of open houses, we also heard that there was a lot of information. So we tried to stay focused on what we've identified as really the key issues, and this situation on Main and Monmouth, as well as just the need to improve general circulation in this area, is emphasized in that open house. I think that's probably something that I would want to. I know we're running long on time here, so I want to just something that I'd want to leave with you guys is since, particularly Mayor, since you live on 7th and Monmouth, that's a part of town that we've been thinking about and we've been talking about a lot, in particular because we recognize that we want to try to maintain the character of that area, starting at about 7th Street, going all the way into downtown. But we have a lot of issues, and we talked a little bit about the need for the Southern Arterial. It's really emphasized in this area, and that's just because if we want to maintain the character, but yet we need to somehow increase the capacity of that roadway to accommodate cars, we want to try to accommodate bikes and peds and other users that it all sort of focuses in right here on this area. So what we've identified or what we put forward is what we feel like is the best approach as part of like a near-term and potentially a long-term solution for when that southern arterial comes into place. So we're not talking about widening Monmouth Street out to like 4 or 5 lanes. We're talking about maintaining it as it is, trying to build in a little bit of capacity to accommodate that longer term until we get that southern arterial in place. So something that we've been asking folks is about their vision for this particular stretch of Monmouth Street, what that means in terms of the types of facilities that are being provided along there, what that means for general circulation in the area, whether we need one-way, two-way, or some other larger improvement to try to improve that particular part of town.
Great, appreciate that. Commissioner Becky J.
I'm just wondering, the long term, yes, the southern arterial really is needed, but in a shorter term, can we get move ahead with getting Chestnut through at least? That will take a lot of the traffic off of 7th from the southwest side of town. If Chestnut goes over to 16th or Talmadge, whatever you call it by then, that will relieve a lot of the traffic coming from 7th, going north on 7th to get to Monmouth, or turning off of Monmouth and going south. And so I guess I would push that we need to figure out a way to put that road through. That will help ease some of the traffic at 7th and Monmouth.
Yeah, Chestnut is one of those, one of the new east-west collectors that we've identified in the plan. It's also something that's been identified as part of in the Southwest concept plan. So we can't take all the credit for that, but yeah, that's certainly part of the plan here.
I would just like to say that I agree with the mayor. If we could get something, that image out to all of us, then we could get it out on our social medias as well to promote this open house. I would really appreciate that.
Sound like a plan?
If I could just jump in with one thing based on what Commissioner Jay was saying. And I just think it's something that I've really learned going through this process. And I think it's just a goal that we should ultimately be thinking about, is any sort of connectivity that we can get through the community is going to be beneficial. So, we immediately jump to the southern arterial. It's a big project, but you know what? We can take steps to improve local connectivity where possible. One thing that we've thought a lot about is potentially using the local street network around downtown to better move people around the downtown area, so not everybody has to stop at the Main and Monmouth intersection. Another idea is just making it clear that people can hop on G and F. F Street's going to have a new bridge here within the planning horizon of this document. It's getting designed right now, and so trying to use those things to improve local connectivity too will help us in the near term. So there are things like that too. So I just wanted to throw that out there as well.
I know a number of us will be looking forward to seeing some of those alternatives and some of those suggestions to move both short term, and then with the development happening to the south, I think there's opportunity to do some of the things that are already discussed.
Yeah.
Kathy Martin Willis, Counselor.
No, I just want to say I actually went and spent some time on my lunch break today at open house number 3, and also walked a constituent through who had received some erroneous information about a street becoming a major arterial. And I just want to say there is a wealth of information there. And so I really want to thank y'all for putting that together. And for folks that are wanting the information, be sure and click on open house number 3 when you go to that homepage, because then it opens up tabs and it lays out the pedestrian and pending streets and outlines, and provides a plethora of graphics. So thank you for putting that together, and I encourage everybody to go spend some time there and then share that with friends.
Thank you,
Well
Councilor.
worth your time.
Anything else from anybody at this point? Okay. Thank you very much for taking the time to make a presentation, and we will encourage other people to take part in the open houses. I wrote it down.
Thanks, everyone.
Great.
Thanks.
Okay. Planning Commission people, I want to thank you folks for joining us this evening. We're going to move on with the rest of the council meeting. You're welcome to listen in on the YouTube channel as we move forward. But thank you very much for both for joining us today and for your service to our community. We know that you all do a very important job deciding what our community will look like next week, next year, and for the rest of the century. Thanks so much. Okay, council members, we're going to continue moving forward here. Council members, you have in front of you, we're back on the agenda. You have minutes from our 2 previous meetings, and do they meet with your approval?
I move to approve both sets of minutes as presented in the council packet.
Thank you. I have a motion, and that's a second by Councilor Martin Willis. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Is there any opposition? Hearing no opposition, the motion carries. Going to visitor and public comment. I know Karen has some public comment that was provided in a written form to us. I'm going to ask her to read the public comment. And I'm going to also assume there's nobody else out there wanting to make any public comment. To you, City Recorder Johnson.
Thank you. This is from Vicki McCubbin of Independence. She says, Independence is an amazing and caring city. This has been clearly demonstrated during the recent ice storm and power outage. The effort by city employees to set up charging stations and Wi-Fi access at the Civic Center has been a great support, and the public notices and communication regarding outages has been appreciated. I especially want to thank and acknowledge the employees of the Public Works Department that did such an outstanding job clearing trees and limbs from city streets and for setting up a debris drop-off at the sports complex. It takes a great team of workers, many of them working behind the scenes to keep things moving forward in times of need. Many have gone above and beyond to keep the people who call Independence home safe and warm. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much for Vicki for making that in. And it's I didn't know exactly what she was going to say, but it rolls right into what my presentation is from my mayor report. I want to take a moment and thank the Independence City staff, the public works folks, the police department, the folks in IT, the administrative and support people who worked lots and lots and lots and lots of overtime, being creative, overcoming ice, mud, and snow, power and no power, cell phones and no cell phones, finding ways to make things work and being creative. The creativity on the debris collection along the streets and putting and places for people to put their own yard debris, I thought was very creative. And I just want to say thank you to all of the staff for all their hard work. It takes a total team, and it takes people with creativity to do the kinds of things. And so appropriate cheers. Related to our recent ice storm, I just want folks to know that, and I think, and it was put out to you in advance, I did sign an emergency declaration, which allows the city to operate and open some doors for resources that could be helping us in the long term. I never thought we'd I'd ever have to sign one, and then I've had to sign two in the last 12 months. So anyway, again, thank you to staff for doing that and following up on that. The next item that I have that I'll speak about, we have some budget committee appointments. You have that in your packet. Let me do a little bit of explanation. We had we have two reappointments to the city budget committee. We have a midterm appointment for Mr. Nathan Christensen. I want you to, many of you know that his wife is a part-time hourly employee for the museum. And we did check with our legal people, and that's not a problem for him to serve on the budget committee because that's making recommendations to the city council that makes the final decision. And all he has to do is just declare in the meeting that his wife is an hourly part-time employee. We also had, during the time when we have looking for budget committee people, there was also an opening on the MyNet budget committee. And so one of the people who applied for the city budget committee spoke to them, and they're willing to serve on the MyNet budget committee from the city of Independence. And so I have all of those in front of you, and I would ask for your approval.
I move to approve Nathan Christensen for the vacancy on the budget committee.
I have a motion to approve and a second. Discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Moving forward, let's go to Councilor. I'm sorry, I'm looking at my agenda here. Councilor Takis under Councilor Liaison Reports. MyNet.
Yeah.
We have to approve the reappointments and the MyNet budget committee. How many?
I thought we approved the whole thing.
I just said Nathan Christensen. I didn't say all of it.
Oh, oops.
Oh, my mistake. I thought it was everything. Okay, so they did the Christensen. We have two reappointments also in there.
Well, then I would like to move to approve Mark Miller to the budget committee.
Would you like to also do the reappointments of Nancy Lodge and Doris Showell also?
Absolutely, Dory. Yes, Dory and Nancy as well.
Thank you.
And I will second that.
I have a motion, second. Discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 And opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you. Excuse me for mishearing. Councilor Takis, you have a liaison report for us.
Yes, MyNet, and there's really not much to report. Our last meeting last month was primarily just preparing for evaluations that are coming up, and that was really it. So our next meeting is actually Thursday, I believe at 6 o'clock. I'm sorry, at 4:30 on Thursday.
Thank you.
But that's my report.
Thank you. Councilor Job, was there a Parks and Rec Board meeting at all?
No, there's really no update. It was canceled due to the storm and then the aftermath of the storm.
Okay, thank you. And Planning Commission from Councilor Martin Willis, anything from you at this point?
Well, another one that's pretty short and sweet. They've been working on much the same items that we have recently. They've been working on the code revisions that have then subsequently come to us over the last few months. Additionally, they've been taking a closer look at our sign code. And so I imagine at some point in the future, we'll see their recommendations on that as well. That's
Great.
it.
Thank you very much. Mr. Pessimir,
Yeah, Mayor, before I go, we did have a traffic safety committee meeting, so I don't know if Councilor Roden wants to report out on that or not.
excuse me, I just followed the agenda. I made a mistake there. Councilor Roden, go ahead, please.
Yeah, we had a council meeting or a traffic safety commission meeting where we talked about the bridge on F Street, and we just kind of looked over the designs that we wanted to use for the safety guardrails and the lighting on the street. And we decided that because the garden is there, and we really want to encourage people to use this as a bypass, that we went with well, it looks like we're going to head towards a nice looking bridge design that will accommodate pedestrian traffic and will provide for a heavier weight vehicles to travel down that road because it is an industrial area more to the west. So it looks like it's a pretty neat project and is gonna maybe cure some of the traffic situations we have in downtown.
Great. Thank you so much. I apologize for missing you. Mr. Pessimir, to you, please.
So thank you, Mayor. And yeah, that was my fault for not noticing that wasn't on the agenda. So I apologize for that. So I do want to go through some storm stuff. I know we've talked about it a lot, but I do think it's important that you kind of get some information about just kind of where we're at and some of the challenges that we faced. I think one of the things that you probably know is we learn from every one of these events. We learn where we can improve. We learn where we need either more systems or more thought or just more planning in different areas. And so we certainly will take everything that we have experienced, we plan on meeting next week to have kind of a post-action report and opportunity to figure out how we can do things better in the future. But we have learned a lot from previous events, but we did learn a lot from this as well. As you know, there was a tremendous amount of debris that came down in the right-of-way in particular, but also on people's private property. The city really can't take care of issues on private property, but we certainly did open up the sports park so people could take their debris there. We have a huge mound of debris at that location, which is great. That's why we opened it up. It's available for both Independence residents as well as Monmouth residents to go there. Obviously, we'll have to do something with that material, but in Independence style, we'll have a lot of wood chips and we'll find something to do with them. We have paths right in the area. We have other opportunities. We'll certainly allow people to take as much as they want. And then whatever's left over, we've been kind of talking to Brants about figuring out how we would get rid of that if there's any left over. But there's still a big project there, obviously, to chip that material up, and we're going to need equipment and personnel to do that. But we have time, and we are fortunate to have that space and to be able to buy that time while everybody else is also recovering and not having to deal with it right away. But we did have to deal with the stuff in the right of way. We had options there. We could have simply said, well, we're going to take care of everything in the streets and leave everything from the curb to the sidewalk to residents to deal with. That's what our code basically says. If it's outside of the right of way, if it's in the beauty strip or the sidewalk, it's the resident's responsibility. Given the amount of material and the difficulties that would have presented for residents and for everybody else, we determined really quickly that wasn't going to be reasonable. And so we worked on getting that done. That took a tremendous amount of work that you guys would recognize earlier from Public Works crews. But I think, as you well know, our Public Works group is mighty, but they are small. And so we had to bring in outside resources very quickly in order to do that. We were fortunate to bring Fremont Forest Systems on, which is a local organization, very quickly, because all arborists and tree services were in high demand, and we were actually able to keep them until yesterday, working every day to clean that up. We also added Timberview Tree Services, which is also another local company, Superior Tree Services out of Eugene, and Lutz Tree Services out of Eugene as well, over the weekend to kind of finish things up. We wanted to get that project done, make sure that our rights of ways and streets and beauty strips were safe and able to be traveled. And we expect that we will be reimbursed for 75% of that from FEMA. But I have to tell you that the overall cost for that are right around $65,000. So obviously we'll get reimbursed for the majority of that. So our estimate is we'll probably be out of pocket about $25,000 to $30,000 on the cleanup. when it's all said and done and reimbursements have come back in. That's, not really out of line for a storm like this. We obviously keep contingency around in our budgets for exactly these type of purposes. And that's where all this money will come from. But it was a lot of work, and it was a lot of debris, and glad to have that done. We also, over the weekend, were able to get to our parks. We prioritized those last just because we felt the need to get the right of ways done first. We were also able to get the trails along the river done this weekend as well. So for the most part, that effort just finished yesterday. And a huge shout out to Public Works for coordinating that, for hauling material for people who also hauled it to the right of way just because they really didn't have any other options, and just to getting that done. We had power issues like everybody else. The city knows that we have a need to provide generators to back up a lot of our systems. And so we take that very seriously, probably more seriously in most communities, just because of the river. We have a lot of different events that cause us to lose power for longer periods of time. So we have a generator that kicks on at City Hall. We also have generators at our most important sewer pump stations. As you can assume, being this close to the river, all sewage flows downhill and ends up in a pump station where it has to be pumped up to the lagoons. We certainly can't gravity feed most of the material in Independence, so we rely heavily on needing to have power for both our water system as well as our sewer systems. Some of the generators that we use for the sewer systems just kind of go around from station to station. They let them fill up a ways, and then they get the power to do those. But that's a fuel intensive and labor intensive project. So we're going to be looking at adding more generators just to take care of that. We have a agreement with Jimmy's, where basically when we have an emergency type event, we have the first dibs on fuel. We put in a generator plug there at their location on a separate circuit so that we can run the pumps and get fuel out of there. We did run into some issues with that just because we didn't have the plug. We had the plug there, but we didn't have the cord pre-made up to go from the generator to the plug. But we were keeping a close eye on everything, and we didn't run into a serious situation where we had a problem. We could have made that up very quickly. But that's something that we're going to be doing in the after action, is getting those pre-made, ready to go, so we can just plug and play, get that done. Huge shout out to Jimmy's. They were extraordinarily helpful to make sure that we had the fuel that we needed for these stations or for generators. But we recognize that, if all we have is 100-gallon container in the back of a pickup to drive that to everything, and some of our generators take 500 gallons, we have an issue. So we'll also be looking to purchase some sort of a towable fuel tank to make sure that we're able to get fuel in larger quantities around the city. But so it was a good test for a lot of the stuff that we had prepared for. And certainly we were able to do it, but we could definitely make things better there as well. Communications, and when I'm done, that I'll certainly stop and let you guys ask questions, but if you have something that you want to just ask as we go, that's fine too. But communications was probably our largest concern as we went through. I would say it was an issue, although it almost got to be a significant issue. I have to say that MyNet staying up throughout the event was essential for us. If that service had gone down, we would have really had significant trouble communicating. We had limited communications because we rely on Verizon so heavily. All of our city cell phones for our police department and Public Works were on the Verizon network, and that was down for many days. And so we were certainly challenged to communicate directly, but we had internet connectivity. And so we have a lot of tools, including Microsoft Teams and other ability that we've exercised extensively during the COVID emergency. And so we were able to communicate that way. We also have radios, of course, that for our public safety that can communicate as well. And we certainly did have some times where we were having to use dispatch pretty heavily in order to communicate with our crews. So we'll definitely be learning from that. We almost got to the point where we sent CERT members around the city to do ham radio operations, just because we knew that our residents had been without cell phone service for quite a while, but it just didn't quite get to that point. But that would have been the next step that we would have gone to if we needed to. As you know, we had opened up internet availability here. We have a broadband grant, which we've been working on with Minet to add additional stations around Independence and Monmouth where people can go and in emergency type situations. So we're excited to get that project finished up here in the next few months. That was a part of the broadband grant that we did with the school district and other partners. So that would be another opportunity. And we're also working with Verizon to get some other type of units that can work off of internet-based systems, so that if we ever have major outages like that, we can have systems that would at least people to drive to location and be able to get a cell phone call out. So lots to learn there on the communication side. And we are, again, very thankful that Minet stayed up, because that really helped us communicate through the entire event. So a huge, again, thanks to Public Works and Police. I appreciate all the community comments and council's comments. They did an amazing job during this event, and they're looking very much to getting back to their new normal after this, as I talked to them today, as I think we all are. So I have more things to talk about for COVID and some other things, but before I move on, are there any questions or comments for me regarding the storm event?
Councilor Core.
I just want to say, Tom, thank you for your leadership. Every one of your communications that you sent to us really was preemptive. I mean, you thought of things that we would want to ask about before we asked. And I really appreciate that. I pass that on to lots of residents. So thank you very much for that.
Oh, well, thank you. I always wonder if I'm hitting the right points or not, but I have to say that I had really good communications. Pacific Power was great to communicate with. We actually had good communications with Verizon as well. One of the after action things is we're going to need to work with our other cell phone providers as well to make sure that we have contacts and everything. But everybody was communicating, and so thank you for that.
Councilor Roden. Councilor Roden, did you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, my computer froze, and then I thought, was it me or you? And then it was everything. It was me. Did we have problems getting a hold of Jimmy Z to attach our generator to get fuel? And is that something in the future? Does he have to be on site in order to get that? Is it in our agreement that we could do that without him being present? Because I know he had no electricity, so he wasn't necessarily there the whole time.
Yeah, and that's a great point. Yes, we did, but we had problems getting in touch with certain individuals just because of their family situation or their communication situation. So that's something we're absolutely working on. He was nothing but helpful, but it did take us a little bit to make sure that we had the understanding of how to work some of the systems inside the place. So that's something that we're working on to get more resiliency. He's completely open to allowing us to do what we need to do to get what we need. And so definitely an area where we're working closely with him on that. So
okay. Great, thank you.
All right, keep going, Tom.
All right, so some good news. I believe, I know I'm excited, and I know it's welcome relief for many of our businesses, but Polk County will be moving from the extreme risk category to the high risk category this Friday, February 26th. That means that restaurants can open to limited indoor seating, and there are lots of other adjustments for gyms and for other people who have been really struggling with being in the extreme risk category. So that is welcome news. I would encourage people to go to the Oregon Health Authority website to get more information about the guidance and just exactly what they can do. But that is great news, and excited for that. I know that leads to the question that Councilor Morton is going to raise her hand here in about 3 seconds and ask me, so I'll try to be preemptive there and talk about in-person council meetings. Obviously, we still have to deal not only with the framework, which changes the different levels, but we also have the governor's orders to deal with and the OSHA rules. So we are looking into figuring out how, at the very earliest possibility, we can get into in-person meetings. Obviously, if we do something outside, we could do that fairly easily. Light is an issue. It was still dark at 6:30 tonight. Cold and rain is an issue. But hey, you know what? We'll look for that perfect Tuesday and see what we can pull off, as well as trying to find a large enough space that we could actually do some in-person meetings. It's really important that we get back to that as soon as we possibly can, and have those interactions. We do a great job virtually, but you definitely lose that deeper meaning and understanding and ability to communicate. And it's easy to get a little bit sideways on things, but so far I've been just really pleased with the way council has worked through this. And so thank you for all your continued support. We are going to continue on with the Love Local campaign into March. The scratch-its were very successful. They were gone in the first week, and so we had to order more. And those were distributed, I believe, this week. We're going to do a different scratch-it campaign with different people involved, especially some of the retail that we didn't get in the first round. Will be in another round in March. It's not a hugely expensive, but it does add up over time, those scratch-its. And so we're doing all that we can while we continue to wait for the feds to let us know if and when and how much monies they might give to the local government to actually help some of our businesses out during the recovery. But we're continuing to do all that we can, and we certainly have plans through March. And then April and May, hopefully there'll be some other relief out there. There is a new payroll protection plan that is flowing out there, and you can certainly go and look that up. I would encourage people to do that. There will also be some commercial or rent assistance that's going to be coming out for businesses. That is a program that is going to be a little bit complicated. I believe the landowner is going to have to make the application for their tenant. So obviously there's going to have to be a decent relationship there. There's also going to be a portion of that they're expecting the landowner to write off, but I don't think it's a large portion of it. And it's going to be a lottery system. So that will be interesting. A lot more to follow. I'm just giving you a teaser on that because I think Business Oregon is probably pulling their hair out right now, trying to figure out how to put rules together that are going to meet the Department of Justice's requirements. And so they've got a monumental task in front of them to do it, but they are trying to get that release here early in March. So I'm excited to see that coming as well. With the changes, we have been talking about what we can do at the library to open things up again, and to our new library manager's credit, he's been working closely with Monmouth to try and figure out how we can have similar operating systems so that it's the same essentially in both communities. And they're working on limited in-person library service plans. I don't have the details on yet because they're still working on the details. But basically they want to allow limited in-person browsing, checkout hours, and then they're trying to figure out what to do with computer use times. I think it'll start out with probably not any, but they're going to do what they can to add to that as quickly as they can, because they know that is a huge asset to the residents in the community. So looking forward to getting that done. Just a couple of other quick items. We found out late last week that ODOT has done some evaluation of the bridge The Independence Bridge that goes across the Willamette River, just on the south side of our town, south and east, that there are some issues with that bridge, and they are going to be putting some weight restrictions on that. The weight restrictions are 25 tons for box trucks and 27 tons for semis, which is not much of a difference. Just to give you an idea, a Brandt's garbage truck weighs 27 tons empty. So obviously that is going to be a problem from them. I have notified the fire district. There's going to be much more to follow on this. We need a lot more information about what, how, where, and why, and what they're going to be doing to fix the problem, because that will definitely cause problems for our community. We're just kind of finding this out as they were talking about putting signs up, and we need a lot more information. So I'm just giving you a heads up that we are requesting that information. And as soon as we find out more, we will certainly let you know and work with our partners to make sure that they aren't, that their concerns are heard and addressed as well. Last thing, just real quick, we are applying or have applied to the Oregon State Marine Board Boating Facilities Grant to design paddlers access in Riverview Park. That's just design at this point. Just letting you know, because a lot of times they'll grant need a resolution from council. In this particular case, they did not need a resolution, but they did want to make sure that council was informed of that. So sorry, that was a lot. I know you've had a lot of presentations tonight and you have heard a lot of talking, but I'm glad to take questions for me or my staff if you have them.
Questions from anybody? Councilor Kaur.
I noticed the reader board all the time because I'm up and down Monmouth quite frequently. Are there any plans or have you thought about putting a reader board out in front of the Civic Center?
You know, we have not had that conversation. Well, at least since I've been here, we haven't had a conversation about that. So let me look into that and see. I know we have certain areas where we allow those and areas where we don't. You know, those aren't cheap projects, but they're a lot less expensive than they used to be. They used to be kind of outside the realm of what seemed reasonable, but those costs have come down, especially if you're looking at something smaller. So let me look into that and get back to you, Councilor. That's a good suggestion, and I'm sure that's been talked about many times before. I'm just not aware of it. So,
Councilor Takis, wasn't that an issue with the Heritage Preservation Commission when they put the board in front of the library?
You know, that was. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I say yes. Yes, it was because it was right next to the historic district. But I don't think it actually was in the historic district. So there was definitely some talk about that. Yeah, but I don't think that would be a problem in front of the Civic Center.
I don't either. Yeah.
Additional question.
I would say it was talked about and it was addressed. So when we were looking through some of the other signs that were down there, it was clear that the issues, concerns about it were resolved. So,
additional question for the manager at this point. I just want to weigh in, and you know, during this ICE event, Manager Pessamera and I were in frequent communication and texting back and forth, and I really appreciate his approach, both in working with his staff and the way he thought about working with the community. I just want to publicly say good job. It's great to have a professional on the job. It makes a real difference, and Independence has put itself out there as good examples for many others in the state. So thank you, Mr. Pessamere. Appreciate it. Okay, we're going to continue moving forward. We have, you have in your packet an Independence Police Department report. There's no oral report in there. It's just a information presentation so that you know what's going on. And this is something that's been, this kind of a presentation has been made for 30 some years, so people know who's done what, where, why, and how, so that you know where it is. we're going to keep moving forward. We have OLCC renewals, and I think Sergeant Headland is handling this. Is he coming on? Good evening, Sergeant, and welcome to City Council this evening. Hello.
All right, I should be on. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, you're good.
All right. So in the packets, you should have received the memo that I completed for the annual liquor license renewals. This is a thing that comes up every year. What we do is review the calls for service related to the establishments in the city. And then we bring that to you guys with a recommendation for renewal of those licenses. That information, with you guys' recommendation goes to the OLCC for their decisions on renewal for liquor licenses for the establishments in the city. With the exception of with the memo that I submitted, the only other thing that's in addition that you don't currently have is that from the recommendation of the city manager, I've started a comparison of calls. So kind of like a 3-year running average of calls for the locations to kind of give people who don't work for the police department and respond to these calls an idea about kind of the total number of calls for each location and whether or not there's any trends related to that. So I will just give you like a verbal comparison. The locations that we've had the most calls at for the last few years are going to be the Arena Sports Bar and the Chase Bar and Grill. Those locations for the last 2 years have had the same total number of calls with 7 and 5 respectively. But the makeup of those calls has been a little bit different throughout the years, whether it be between calls for service or calls related to a DUI investigation where someone may have consumed alcohol at one of those locations. And then other than that, the locations are really minimal with only 1 or no calls for service or DUIs related to those locations. I don't know if anybody had any questions related to any of those calls or the report in general, but I'd be happy to answer those if you have questions.
Councilor Morton.
Yes, thank you for clarifying the situation with both the Arena and Chase, because I had gone through that list also and was surprised to see so many calls. It seems like it's been pretty consistent that there was little police involvement in any of our area servers of spirits. But you don't consider any of these calls to be a tremendous threat of any kind? Are these all basically easily handled by the police department?
Generally speaking, yeah, most of the calls that we respond to at the locations are handled with the officers that we have working or with assistance from another agency nearby. We haven't had any instances of like tremendous calls for service that we couldn't handle or like large events that got out of hand. I do understand that looking at the numbers here, looking at that, the numbers seem consistent, and they kind of are for the last 3 years or so. But historically, the numbers at alcohol establishments in the city over the last like 5 to 10 years, those numbers would have been considerably higher than the numbers that you're seeing today.
Yeah, you don't have the graph in front of you, but I was able to see it. And it's remarkable over the last few years how consistent it has been between these different groups. It's been really the same for both Chase as well as Arena for the last 3 years, with just slightly different calls, makeup of calls, as Justin mentioned. So very consistent, but we'll include that in the packet you get next year, so you'll be able to kind of see that as it goes over time.
Is a call for service different than a call to address a DUI?
Yeah, so the way that I look at these calls is a call for service would be something that either we get called to the location by the location. So essentially they call us and say that there's a problem there, or we get a call from another party saying that there's a problem at the location itself. The DUI investigations, or what I identify as those, are going to be DUI arrests that are either made like leaving that location, where there maybe a vehicle leaves there and gets stopped on a traffic violation, and is arrested for DUI, or it's a DUI that's arrested within the city by one of our officers. And during the investigation, they either say directly that they were consuming alcohol at one of those locations, or through the investigation, we determined that they were consuming alcohol there.
Additional questions?
And I'd be happy to send that, or the city manager can forward that document out to you if you guys would like to see that that chart, or I can send it to any of you as well if you'd like.
Great. Okay, we get to some cities don't take any action, but we like to keep an eye on things like this, and so if people would like to suggest action.
Yes, I move to recommend approval of all of the liquor licenses upon receipt of city fee.
Second.
Motion second. Is there discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed? That motion passes. Thank you very much. Appreciate it, Sergeant.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good night.
Mr. Pessamere, you have the final item for the evening.
Yes, I found my mute button. Sorry, I was trying to email you the CC report. Just real quickly, we had a great priority setting meeting in February to talk about the different priorities for city council. I think you heard tonight, continued echoed support for one of the key ones that you talked about, which is the Southern Arterial. Obviously, there's lots of other things that we will do, but we got to get started on that right away. And so I really don't have a whole lot to add. I sent the information out to you earlier, and our plan would be to basically, if it's acceptable, would be just to finalize this and get it posted on a website and everywhere else. It's a bit of a challenge to actually take, all the comments that you had and kind of roll them up into things that aren't too specific, but aren't too general as well, so that we can have activities that we do throughout the year. Barneyworth took their best effort at that, but I'll say that they also included all your comments down at the bottom, so nothing gets lost either way. But it does give us a little bit more flexibility to kind of figure out how to deal with not only the strategies that you came up with, or the priorities, but also the actions that we need to take in order to do that. So it was extremely helpful to me and staff to actually have some things to focus on, especially things other than COVID. So thank you for that. And we've already started on a few of them, and are looking forward to moving the rest of those forward throughout the next calendar year.
So council members, we spent a good portion of a whole Saturday creating this, and what this is a reflection of what that is. Does that look okay with everybody? Okay. Without objection, we'll just consider it approved. Is that okay?
Yeah, I don't need a motion on this, but it was just a thumbs up, and we will publish it. And I did notice that the title has the wrong date on it, so we'll fix that and then publish it as well.
Great. Okay. Council announcements. Okay. If somebody would send us home to dinner. That somebody would say adjourn, please.
Move to adjourn.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you very much. Have a pleasant evening. Thanks everybody for your time this evening.
Thank you.
Bye.